What happens when a live daytime talk show suddenly turns into a pressure cooker? When a Hollywood superstar and a daytime host collide in a moment so tense, the studio itself seems to hold its breath. Before we dive into this unraveling storm, hit that subscribe button for stage view, like this video, and drop a comment to let us know you're ready for more explosive celebrity moments. The cameras were already rolling when the atmosphere shifted. Not dramatically, not with an obvious sound or spark, but with something quieter, something colder. The kind of chill that ripples through a studio audience even when the bright lights try to wash it away. People couldn't quite place it at first. They just knew something felt off. Gal Gadot walked onto the set of The View with the kind of grace people often assign to myth. Shoulders back, that familiar, confident smile, the kind she'd perfected over years of red carpets and global premieres. Yet behind her eyes there was a flicker of tension, a shadow that didn't belong to the polished composure she showed the world. She greeted each host with a warm embrace, but when she reached Sara Haines, something halted. It was subtle, a brief hesitation, a stiffened posture. Sarah's smile tightened for a fraction of a second, and Gal's hand, halfway outstretched, dropped just slightly before reconnecting into the expected handshake. It would have gone unnoticed to most viewers at home, but inside the studio, the air seemed to thicken. "Welcome back to the show, Gal," Sara said, her voice bright. Too bright, almost sharpened with something slightly defensive. "It's good to have you again." Gal nodded politely. "Thank you for having me. It's always lovely to be here." But the word lovely hung in the air with a sort of bitter undertone. The tension wasn't loud, but it was present, like a pressure building beneath a smooth surface. The audience applauded, enthusiastic but confused, as the hosts guided Gal to her seat. The cameras repositioned, crew shifting around them like gears in a machine trying desperately to mask the fracture they could all sense. Someone backstage whispered, please let this go smoothly." But smooth was already off the table. As the applause died down, Whoopi opened the segment. "So, Gal, your new film is causing a lot of buzz." But Sara cut in, not rudely, but abruptly enough that Whoopi turned her head with a slow blink. "Actually," Sara said, gesturing with a stiff smile, "before we get into the movie, Gal, there's something I wanted to ask you. Something that's been circulating for a while." Gal's eyes narrowed, not enough to be overt hostility, but enough to reveal that she felt cornered. "Sure," she replied calmly, though the faintest tremor betrayed the pressure beneath her voice. "What's on your mind?" The studio shifted. People leaned in, uncertain but captivated. Even the live audience seemed to draw a collective breath, as though sensing they were on the brink of something sharp. Sarah's tone remained soft, polite, but laced with a subtle accusation. "There's been talk online," she began, "about your demeanor in certain interviews lately. Some people are saying you've been, well, less approachable. Maybe even dismissive." Gal blinked once, slowly. "Dismissive?" she repeated, the word tasting like something unfamiliar on her tongue. Sara nodded, lifting her cue card. "There are clips circulating, little moments, maybe taken out of context," she added quickly, as if cushioning her own strike. "But people feel there's been a change. Some fans say they're worried you're not connecting with them the way you used to." The other host stiffened slightly. Joy shifted in her seat. Sunny glanced sideways, her jaw tightening. Even Whoopi murmured, "Oh boy," under her breath. It wasn't that Sarah's question was inappropriate. The View had built its brand on blunt, difficult conversations. But there was something about the way she delivered it, direct, deliberate, and strangely personal, as if this wasn't just journalism, but something deeper. Gal inhaled, holding the breath in her chest for an extra beat. She placed her hands on her lap, fingers curling slightly as she prepared her response. "I think," she said carefully, "that sometimes people mistake boundaries for a lack of warmth. I've been juggling a lot, being a mother, working long hours, traveling constantly. Maybe I look tired. Maybe I have moments where I'm not as energetic. But dismissive." She shook her head. "That's not who I am." Her voice wasn't defensive. It was quiet, weighed down by honesty. Yet Sarah's expression didn't soften. "So you think it's just misinterpretation?" Sara asked, her tone edging sharper. "That nothing's changed?" Gal's eyes flashed. "Of course things have changed," she replied, her voice low but firm. "Life changes. Stress changes. Growth changes. But I haven't changed the core of who I am." A hush fell. Even the cameras seemed to hum a little quieter. Sara leaned back in her chair, tilting her head. "Well," she said, "some would argue that certain comments you've made, especially in recent press tours, came off as, let's say, tone-deaf. Gal froze, not dramatically, but with that subtle stiffness shared by anyone who knows they're being targeted, cornered, or misunderstood. Tone-deaf, she echoed softly. Sara glanced at her card again, though everyone could tell she didn't need it. She'd rehearsed this moment. There was an interview last month, she said. You made a statement about global issues, and it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Gal's jaw tightened. She opened her mouth once, stopped, then opened it again. If we're going to talk about that interview, she said carefully, I think we should talk about context, because... But context doesn't change how people felt, Sara interrupted again, smiling almost apologetically. Sunny shifted in her seat. Joy rolled her eyes dramatically, muttering, Sara, come on, under her breath. Whoopi raised her hand, trying to step in. Let her finish, she said gently. But Sara kept going, the momentum of confrontation pushing her forward. I'm not attacking you, she insisted, smiling a smile that somehow looked like both an olive branch and a blade. I'm just saying there are people who feel hurt. Gal's lip twitched. I'm aware, she said. I'm not ignoring that. But do you understand why they felt hurt? Sara pressed. The studio grew still. The audience was silent, not bored, not disengaged, but frozen. Gal's eyes sharpened, not with anger, but with something more complex. A mixture of disappointment, frustration, and a controlled version of the kind of emotional wound that comes from being publicly dissected. Yes, she said quietly. I understand why people felt hurt. But understanding doesn't mean I agree with all the interpretations. Sara's eyebrow lifted. So you're saying what? That the audience misread you? Gal took a breath. A slow one. Controlled, measured, but heavy. I'm saying that people sometimes react to moments without seeing the entire picture. Which sounds like you are saying they misread you, Sara countered, her tone turning pointed. Whoopi leaned in. Sara, she warned. But Gal held up her hand, stopping Whoopi from intervening. It's okay, Gal said, though her voice trembled faintly. We can have this conversation. She turned fully toward Sara now, the lights catching the slight sheen in her eyes. Sara, she said, if you have a personal issue with something I've said, I'd rather you just ask me directly instead of speaking through people online. A collective gasp rippled across the audience. It wasn't loud, it was sharp, a sudden intake of breath that sliced the room open. Sara's face froze, her smile cracking into something brittle. I don't have a personal issue, she said quickly. But the way her voice wavered told a different story. Gal didn't smirk. She didn't gloat. She simply held Sara's gaze with a calm intensity that felt far too grounded for the tension boiling around them. I'm happy to clarify anything, Gal continued. But I won't be a vessel for online narratives that twist everything into outrage. The audience murmured again, the tension now charged with electricity. Sunny stepped in gently. Let's not make this adversarial, she said softly. We're here to have a conversation. But Sara leaned forward again, tightening her grip on her card, her tone quiet but edged. I'm simply asking questions that fans have been asking. Gal nodded. Then let me answer them. Sara didn't reply. And that silence was louder than anything spoken. Gal shifted in her seat, her voice steady as she continued. People will always interpret things through their own lens. But I'm human. I make mistakes. I have moments where words don't land the way I intend. But I care deeply about people, about how they feel. And I don't take that lightly. There was sincerity in her voice, raw, unfiltered sincerity that cracked through the polished facade. Sara swallowed, her eyes flicking downward for the first time. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable, she murmured. Gal smiled softly, though her eyes remained guarded. I'm not uncomfortable. I'm just choosing to be clear. A beat. A breath. A slow exhale. Then Sara said something no one expected. Well, she began softly, some would say clarity hasn't been your strong suit lately. The words hit the table like a dropped glass. Sharp. Irreparable. Echoing in a room that suddenly felt too small. Gal blinked. Once. Twice. Her composure cracked, barely but visibly. And from the audience, a low murmur rose like a tide. Whoopi finally stepped in, her voice firm. Okay, she said. Enough. But the damage was already done. The line had been crossed. The tension had ignited. And whatever was coming next, it would not be gentle. Gal looked at Sara with a mixture of hurt and astonishment. The audience waited, breathless. The room vibrated with unspoken words. And the storm was only just beginning. The silence that followed Whoopi's enough wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that trembles beneath the surface, like a fault line holding back an earthquake. The audience sat frozen, eyes darting between Sara and Gal like spectators at a match that had suddenly turned into something far more personal and unpredictable. But despite Whoopi's attempt to diffuse the moment, the tension refused to disappear. It hung above the table like a charged cloud, thick and inescapable. Gal inhaled slowly, grounding herself. Her fingers pressed gently against the armrests of her chair, knuckles paling for the briefest second before she released the tension with a steady exhale. She forced a small smile, calm, poised, but undeniably strained. "I think," she said quietly, her voice steady but soft, "that clarity is something we all struggle with sometimes." Her tone wasn't confrontational. It was honest, reflective, vulnerable. But that vulnerability carried weight, and everyone at the table felt it. Sara leaned back, her expression unreadable, though her shoulders were tight, and her gaze avoided Gal's for the first time since the segment had begun. Something in her posture said she wasn't expecting this moment to turn against her. The audience murmured, unsure whether to applaud, gasp, or simply hold their collective breath. A few exchanged confused glances, whispering beneath the hum of the stage lights. Whoopi cleared her throat, trying again to move things forward. Let's talk about the film," she said with forced cheerfulness, the kind that feels like a bandage slapped over a deep wound. "Gal's here because she's got this incredible new project." But the shift didn't land. The energy in the room had already twisted itself into something impossible to shake off. Gal nodded politely. "Yes, the film." But before she could continue, Sara spoke again. "Actually," she said, her tone quieter now, but firmer, almost brittle, "I think it's fair to address this properly. You said you're human, that you make mistakes. That's good. But people want accountability, not just explanations." Sunny's eyes widened slightly. Joy muttered a low, "Oh, come on," under her breath, loud enough that a few front-row audience members exchanged uneasy smiles. Gal raised her eyes to Sara, the tension returning like a slow tide. "I'm not avoiding accountability," Gal said gently. "But accountability doesn't mean letting myself be misrepresented." Sara opened her mouth as if to respond, but Gal continued before she could. "I don't dismiss people's feelings," she said. "And I don't think I've ever suggested that they misinterpreted me simply because they were wrong. I'm saying that feelings and intentions don't always align perfectly, and that's something we all deal with." Her voice cracked slightly on the word deal, not from weakness but from intensity. The room felt it, the crew felt it, the audience felt it. Sara, however, sat stiffly, her jaw set. "Then why?" she asked slowly. "Do you think people reacted so strongly to what you said?" Gal paused. For a moment, everyone thought she wouldn't answer. She looked down at her hands, fingers interlaced, thumbs trembling faintly. She wasn't afraid. She was calculating, thoughtful, trying to navigate landmines placed at her feet. Finally, she lifted her gaze. "Because people are hurting," she said quietly. "Because the world is noisy and divided, and I think it's easier to lash out than to understand nuance." Her voice softened further. "And maybe, yes, maybe I could have said things differently." The audience reacted to that, a soft ripple of empathy, nodding heads, murmurs of approval. It wasn't a concession, it was humanity. But Sara didn't smile. She didn't nod. She didn't soften. "So you admit," she said carefully, "that you were part of the problem." Gal froze for a heartbeat, the words hitting her sharply. Joy slammed her palm lightly on the table. "Oh my God, Sara, that's not what she said." "Joy," Sunny warned, placing a hand near her. "No," Joy insisted. "That's twisting it." Sara's face stiffened further, her voice suddenly tight. "I'm just asking the questions people want answered." Gal closed her eyes for a brief moment, as if steadying the ground beneath her. When she opened them again, her expression was calm, but the kind of calm that comes from someone forcing themselves to stay composed under fire. "I admit," she said softly, "that I'm not perfect, that I'm always learning. But I will not say I was part of the problem when the conversation itself was twisted before it even reached me." Sara blinked, her lips pressing together tightly. "And if someone wants to talk about it with me," Gal continued, "I'd rather they talk to me directly, not through assumptions, not through headlines, not through outrage." The air crackled. It wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was heavy, simmering, electric. Whoopi pressed her hands together, leaning in. "Look," she said gently, "this is what happens when feelings get involved. And that's okay. But we don't have to tear each other down to get clarity." Her tone softened the edges of the moment, but only slightly. Sarah's eyes remained locked on Gal, but something in her expression shifted. Not remorse, not apology, but recognition. A glimmer of something real. Still, she wasn't done. "So you don't think anything you said was harmful?" she said, quieter now, but still firm. Gal's breath caught. Not from surprise, but from the weight of being cornered again. "I think," she said slowly, "that harm can be unintentional. And when it is, the best thing anyone can do is listen, learn, and clarify." "Clarify," Sarah echoed, almost to herself. Right. The way she said it, though, it held something sharp. Before anyone could process her tone, before Gal could respond, Whoopi stepped in more firmly this time. "Okay," she said, her voice carrying authority. "We're getting lost in something that's not the purpose of today's show. Gal's here to talk about her work, her life, things she's excited about." She turned to Gal with a warm, apologetic smile. "Let's talk about the movie." Gal nodded slowly, though her eyes lingered on Sarah a moment longer. "Yes," she said softly. "Let's." The shift was forced. Everyone felt it. The conversation moved on, but the emotional bruises remained fresh, throbbing beneath every word. Sunny took the lead now, her tone gentle. "Gal, the film dives into themes of resilience and identity. What drew you to such a demanding role?" Gal smiled, genuinely this time, though faintly. "I was drawn to the character's inner strength," she said. Her ability to stay grounded despite the chaos around her. There was a quiet irony in the statement that did not go unnoticed. The audience laughed softly, relieved to return to safer ground, but still glancing between Sarah and Gal, waiting to see if the tension would snap again. Gal continued, slowly easing back into her comfort zone. "She's a woman who faces criticism, pressure, loss, but she keeps going. She keeps pushing. And she chooses compassion even when she's misunderstood." A murmur of appreciation fluttered through the room. "But Sarah?" She sat silent, hands folded tightly in her lap. Sunny nodded warmly. "That emotional depth really comes through in your performance." "Thank you," Gal replied, her voice gentler now. "It was a difficult role, emotionally. I had to tap into parts of myself that I usually keep private." Joy leaned forward, smiling. "It shows. You were phenomenal. Truly." The audience applauded, and for the first time since entering the stage, Gal's smile reached her eyes. But then, out of nowhere, Sarah spoke again. "And did you ever feel," she asked, her tone deceptively calm, "that you connected with the character because she also faces backlash she believes is unfair?" The applause died instantly. The tension snapped back like a stretched elastic band finally released. Gal stared at her, a mixture of surprise and disappointment flickering in her expression. Even Whoopi looked stunned. "Sarah," she exclaimed. But Sarah continued, her voice soft but piercing. "I mean, you mentioned misunderstanding earlier. And your character deals with a lot of misinterpretation too. Did you feel personal resonance there?" It was the kind of question that could have been insightful, if it wasn't already clear that Sarah was digging with intention rather than curiosity. Gal didn't respond immediately. The pause stretched, long and fragile. Finally, she spoke with quiet strength. "I think," she said slowly, "that every actor connects with their characters in different ways. Yes, I understand what it means to be misunderstood. Most people do." Her tone shifted slightly, firmer, colder, but still controlled. "But I also believe that turning a conversation about art into a commentary on personal disputes takes away from the purpose of why I'm here." This time, the audience reacted with a ripple of applause, not loud, not wild, but supportive. Sunny nodded, smiling sympathetically. Joy muttered a grateful, "Thank you," under her breath. Sarah leaned back, crossing her arms slightly, her expression unreadable. Whoopi exhaled loudly. "All right," she said firmly. "We're moving on." The interview continued, but something had changed. No matter how professionally Gal answered the remaining questions, no matter how Sunny and Joy attempted to steer things toward lighter territory, the undercurrent was undeniable. Gal remained gracious. She laughed at the right moments, smiled warmly when the audience responded, and spoke passionately about her work. But every now and then, the camera caught her eyes drifting, toward Sarah, toward the table, toward some invisible point she was trying to steady herself with. Sarah, meanwhile, stayed unusually quiet. She didn't speak unless directly asked. She didn't interrupt. She didn't smile much. And yet she watched Gal. Closely. Constantly. As if trying to read something she wasn't sure she truly understood. By the time the segment neared its end, the emotional fatigue was almost palpable. Whoopi smiled, her voice lighter now. "Gal, thank you for joining us today. We wish you all the success with the film. Gal returned the smile. Thank you for having me. But just before the segment officially wrapped, just before the cameras were meant to cut away, Sara spoke one last time. Gal, she said softly. Gal turned to her. Sara hesitated. Her voice, when she found it, was gentler than it had been all show. You know, she murmured, I never meant to make you feel attacked. The room froze again, but differently this time, quieter, more fragile. Gal looked at her, not with anger, not with smugness, but with something honest. Something tired. Something human. I know, she said softly. A brief silence. A brief truce. Then the director called out. And we're clear. The cameras cut. And that was when everything truly began to unravel. The red light on the main camera blinked twice before fading to black. That tiny shift, so small the average viewer never notices it, signaled a transformation far more dramatic than any audience could imagine. On-screen smiles melted. Carefully balanced postures shifted. The energy on the set of The View transformed instantly from staged professionalism to something rawer, more exposed, more dangerous. The space behind the host's table felt suddenly too bright, too warm, too crowded. The hum of studio machinery seemed louder. The rustle of crew members preparing for commercial break echoed like footsteps in a cavern. Gal exhaled long and quietly, her face turning away from the still warm camera lights. Her fingers released their grip on the chair, though her knuckles still carried faint impressions from where she'd held herself together. Her poised exterior remained, but cracks flickered along the surface, delicate and bright under the harsh fluorescent glow. Sara didn't move. She sat still, as though her body refused to follow the director's cue. Her hands remained clasped, her shoulders stiff. Her eyes were locked on the table in front of her, but her thoughts were clearly somewhere else, churning, tangled, impossible to contain. Joy leaned forward with a huff that filled the silence. Well, she muttered under her breath, that was a mess. Sunny shot her a warning look, but even she couldn't hide the tension in her expression. Whoopi stood slowly, stretching her back and releasing a sigh that carried more weight than she likely intended. She glanced at Gal, then at Sara, her eyes narrowing slightly. Okay, she said quietly, her tone low. Let's reset. That got too real. For a moment, nobody moved. The audience, still seated, still watching, still trying to decipher the atmosphere, had begun to whisper, picking apart the tension like investigators searching a crime scene. A crew member stepped toward Gal. We'll get you some water, he murmured. Gal nodded, her jaw tight. Thank you. He hurried off. Gal finally turned toward Sara, her posture steady, but her eyes carrying the kind of disappointment that stings more than anger ever could. I didn't expect that from you, she said quietly. Sara flinched. She lifted her gaze slowly, meeting Gal's eyes with something like guilt or defensiveness, fighting beneath the surface. I wasn't trying to upset you, she murmured. Gal shook her head faintly. But you did. Her voice wasn't sharp. It was soft, too soft. The softness of someone trying and failing to protect themselves. The crew pretended not to listen, but every ear was tuned in. Even the audience, though being ushered away for the break, lingered in their seats, watching in stunned fascination. Sara swallowed. I had to ask the questions people were talking about. No, Joy interrupted, rolling her eyes as she leaned over the table. No, you didn't. Not like that. Sara shot her a glare. I was doing my job. Sunny stepped in, her voice gentle but firm. There's doing your job, and then there's pushing someone into a corner. Sara's lips twitched. I didn't corner her. Gal stood up slowly. When she spoke, her voice was calm, almost eerily so. Sara, I don't mind difficult questions. I don't mind criticism. But you didn't want clarification, and you didn't want understanding. Sara pushed herself up from her chair, her expression tightening. That's not fair. You wanted a moment, Gal said softly. Sara blinked. A moment. Gal nodded. A viral clip. A confrontation. Something people would talk about tomorrow. The accusation wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it hit like a strike to the chest. Sara's breath stuttered. That's not true, she whispered. Gal looked at her, her expression turning sad. Then why did it feel personal? Sara opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her eyes flickered downward again. A quiet voice broke through the silence. Hey, Whoopi said gently. Let's step back from this. All of us. Emotions are high. The cameras are off, so let's breathe. But Sara shook her head, stepping around the table toward Gal. The movement was impulsive, like something inside her had snapped. "Do you think I wanted to embarrass you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Do you think I enjoyed that?" Gal faced her fully now, not flinching, not stepping back. "I think you didn't think about how it would feel." The entire set was silent. Crew members froze mid-step. Stagehands pretended to check equipment that didn't need checking. Sarah's jaw tightened. "You're Gal Gadot," she said, her tone unsteady. "People listen to you. They take your words seriously. It's not crazy to ask you to explain them." "I explained them," Gal replied quietly. "But explaining wasn't enough for you." Sarah inhaled sharply, her chest rising with tension. "Because it felt like you were avoiding responsibility." Sonny stepped forward. "Sarah." "No," Sarah snapped, turning to her. "Let her answer." Gal straightened her back, the lines of her posture hardening like a barrier. "I wasn't avoiding anything." "Then why did you dodge every time I brought up accountability?" Sarah shot back. Gal's eyes flashed, not with anger, but with a wounded sort of disbelief. "Because you weren't asking for understanding. You were asking for an admission of guilt I don't carry." That sentence hit the studio air like a drop of ink in water, slowly spreading, gradually darkening everything around it. Sarah's voice softened, but it didn't lose its edge. "People feel hurt by what you said. And I addressed that," Gal said. "Respectfully. Honestly. But you wanted something else. Something more dramatic." Sarah's breath wavered. The silence that followed was devastating. Joy finally broke it, voice low. "Look, whatever this is, you two need to talk privately. Not here. Not with an audience listening from the hallway." But Sarah shook her head again, stubbornness etched into every line of her expression. "I don't want to talk privately. I want to talk now." Whoopi groaned. "Lord, help us." Gal crossed her arms, not defensively, but protectively, like she was holding something inside her chest from breaking open. "You didn't have to phrase your questions like accusations," Gal said quietly. "You didn't have to make it sound like I don't care about the people who support me." "That's not what I meant," Sarah insisted. But that's how it landed. The simple truth of the statement settled between them like a cold fog. The lights overhead flickered faintly, just the building's aging infrastructure, but the timing made the entire moment feel surreal. Sarah's shoulders slumped slightly. Her voice came out small, almost uncertain. "So what do you want from me?" "An apology." Gal hesitated, not because she didn't have an answer, but because the answer hurt to acknowledge. "I don't want an apology," she said. "I want sincerity." Sarah blinked rapidly, as though the word threw her off balance. "Sincerity?" "Yes." Gal stepped a little closer. "Because it felt like you weren't talking to me today. You were talking to an idea of me, a version you chose to confront." Sarah's breath hitched. The audience, still lingering by the exits even as stagehands tried to usher them out, strained to catch every word. Sarah shook her head faintly. "I wasn't trying to create conflict." Gal's voice softened now, but the softness was painful. "Then why did it feel like you were angry?" Sarah froze. Everyone saw it, the way her face shifted, the way she inhaled sharply, the way her eyes flickered downward, avoiding the question. And Gal noticed too. Her expression changed, curiosity mixed with dawning understanding. "Are you angry with me?" she asked gently. Sarah's breath trembled. She looked away. "It's complicated." Sonny whispered. "Oh no." Joy muttered, "Here we go." Gal took another step closer, not confrontational, not towering, just present. "Tell me." Sarah shook her head. "It doesn't matter." "It does," Gal pressed, her voice soft but persistent. "Because if this isn't about the interview, then what is it about?" Sarah swallowed hard. "It's nothing." Gal didn't move. "Sarah." Sarah flinched again at the sound of her name. "It's nothing," Sarah repeated, shaking her head faster now. People think you're perfect. Untouchable. And sometimes that makes it hard to ask hard questions." The confession hung in the air, thin and brittle. Gal's face softened, not with victory, but with empathy. "Sarah, I'm not untouchable." "You act like you are," Sarah whispered. That stung, but not in a superficial way. It stung like something deep and complicated. Gal's voice cracked slightly. "No, I act like someone who's learned how to protect herself." Sarah's lips parted, but no words came out. Gal continued, softer now. "Being calm doesn't mean being unaffected. Holding myself together doesn't mean I don't feel pressure. Or criticism. Or pain." Sarah blinked rapidly, her eyes glistening. "That interview you mentioned," Gal said, her voice trembling faintly. "I was exhausted. I was overwhelmed. I misspoke. And I own that. But the internet doesn't accept flaws. It destroys you for them. Sara looked up, her voice quiet. You didn't look overwhelmed. Gal smiled sadly. I looked composed. Because that's what I've been trained to be. Sara stared at her, really stared at her, and something in her expression shifted. The edge softened. The hostility drained. What remained was something rawer, more human. The kind of recognition that comes when someone realizes they've been fighting a shadow, not a person. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Sara whispered, I didn't know. Gal nodded slowly. You didn't ask. Joy exhaled, leaning back. Jesus, this is intense. Sunny whispered. It needed to come out. Whoopi rubbed her temples. Y'all are giving me a headache. Gal took another breath, deeper this time. Sara, if you're angry with me, tell me why. Sara opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. She shook her head. I'm not angry at you. I'm frustrated. With the situation. With the pressure. With the way everything gets twisted. Gal nodded. I understand that. Sara's voice cracked. And I guess maybe part of me expected more from you. Gal's brow softened. More what? More awareness, Sara whispered. More sensitivity to how your words impact people. Gal's expression shifted. This time, she wasn't hurt. She wasn't defensive. She was reflective. Understanding. I'm learning, she said quietly. Every day. Sara nodded slowly. A beat of silence. Then Gal added gently. Maybe we're both learning. Sara let out a shaky exhale. Maybe. The tension broke, not with a dramatic apology, not with a grand emotional embrace, but with something quieter. A mutual exhaustion. A fragile acknowledgement. A shared human flaw. But peace? Peace was still far away. Because as the backstage doors opened and murmurs of producers filled the space, something else began brewing. Something bigger than the two women. Something neither of them could control. Behind the set, phones were already buzzing. Clips of the on-air confrontation were being uploaded. Tweets were flying. Screenshots were circulating. And the world outside the studio was waking up to a narrative neither Gal nor Sara had fully realized they'd created. A storm. A real one. And by the time they stepped off that stage, the outside world would already be on fire. The studio lights had dimmed to a muted, uneasy glow, but the tension from the confrontation still hung suspended over the audience like smoke refusing to clear. Even after the commercial break, even after the cameras rolled again, the air felt electrically charged, like everyone was still bracing for another spark to ignite. But the clash was over. The damage was done. And now, the world would deal with the shockwaves. Gal Gadot sat perfectly still, her expression a tight blend of calm and unresolved anger, like a warrior who knows the battle has ended but still feels the echo of the blade in her hand. Across from her, Sara Haines kept an awkward half-smile plastered on her face, the kind television hosts use when they're holding back the urge to either defend themselves or disappear entirely. The other co-hosts maintained their bright on-air composure, but the truth revealed itself in their stolen glances. A silent acknowledgement that they had all just witnessed one of the most uncomfortable moments in The View's history. The audience didn't clap after the segment resumed. They didn't cheer, laugh, or murmur. They just watched, an entire studio locked in a strange blend of fascination and disbelief. The cameras cut to commercial again, and instantly, the illusion of show business calm shattered. Producers rushed the stage like firefighters responding to a flare-up. Some went directly to Gal, speaking gently, cautiously, while others gathered around Sara, whose face had finally surrendered the forced smile and now showed raw confusion, maybe even regret. Gal didn't move. She simply sat with her hands folded, staring straight ahead, breathing slowly. It was the look of someone trying very hard not to let the adrenaline dictate her words. A producer knelt beside her. Gal, are you okay? Do you need a moment backstage? She finally looked at him, her eyes steady. I'm fine, she said softly. I just didn't expect that. Another producer turned to Sara. What happened? What were you trying to say there? Sara massaged her temple, exhaling shakily. I was just asking a question. I didn't think she'd take it like that. But it came off as an accusation, another staff member said. Sara's shoulders slumped. I know, she muttered. I know. I just misread the tone. Meanwhile, the audience buzzed again, but now in scattered whispers rather than the earlier hush. Some seemed unsettled. Others were thrilled by the drama they had witnessed. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone felt the impact. When the show wrapped, the applause sign lit up, but claps came reluctantly, unsteady, staggered, unsure if celebration was appropriate. Gal rose from her seat with a slow, deliberate grace. She shook hands politely with the other co-hosts, exchanging professional smiles, the kind you give when you're done fighting and simply want to leave the battlefield with your dignity intact. Sara stood, too, taking a half-step toward her. "Gal," she said quietly, her voice stripped of the earlier sharpness. Gal turned. Sara swallowed. "I didn't mean to offend you." Gal held her gaze, her expression unreadable. "I know," she finally replied. "But intention and impact, those are different things." Sara nodded, her throat tight. "You're right." Gal's eyes softened just a fraction. "We're good. Just think before you phrase something like that next time." The words were gentle, but firm, like a boundary drawn in sand with a steady hand. Sara accepted it with a small, grateful nod. Gal left the stage first, walking through the side exit, passing the audience who watched her with wide, curious eyes. Some whispered her name. Others pulled out their phones, already typing, already spreading what they had witnessed. Sara stayed behind for a moment, sinking into the chair Gal had just occupied. The empty space still held the weight of the moment. You could almost feel the ghost of the argument lingering in the air. One of the co-hosts leaned over gently. "You okay?" Sara forced a weak smile. "Yeah, I just blew it, didn't I?" "No," the co-host said carefully. "You hit a nerve. It happens, but you'll need to address it." Sara nodded again, this time slower, heavier. Because she already knew what was coming. The storm. And the storm hit fast. Within minutes of the episode ending, clips of the exchange flooded the internet. Audience members shared shaky cell phone footage. Fans posted reactions. Twitter erupted with hashtags. Hashtag Gal Gadot. Hashtag The View. Hashtag Sara Haines. Hashtag Gal vs. Sara. Hashtag Awkward Interview. Comment sections ignited with debates, some applauding Gal's poise, others defending Sara's questioning style, others blaming the show's producers for stoking tension. Media outlets jumped in like sharks scenting blood. Gal Gadot shuts down host on live TV. Sara Haines crosses the line? The View's most uncomfortable moment yet. Talk shows, podcasts, celebrity analysts, everyone had something to say. Everyone broke down the argument, frame by frame, tone by tone, like it was courtroom evidence. Fans of Gal praised her strength, calling the moment empowering. Critics accused the show of intentionally provoking her. Supporters of Sara insisted she meant no harm. People who had never even seen The View before suddenly had strong opinions about a confrontation they watched for 11 seconds on a loop. A few hours later, Gal posted a short message on her social media story. "Respect is important, even in heated moments. I believe in open conversations, but also in empathy. Moving forward, Red Heart." No names mentioned. No blame pointed. It was graceful, calm, unmistakably Gal. Sara posted later that evening. "I take responsibility for a moment that didn't come out as intended. I respect Gal as an artist and as a person. We've spoken privately. All love." And yet the internet didn't calm down. If anything, the statements fueled more speculation. People dissected every word, every emoji, every imagined subtext. Some claimed Gal was too gentle. Others insisted Sara was too soft in her apology. Some demanded Gal return to the show. Others declared Sara should be replaced. It was chaos. And beneath all that noise, the real moment, the raw, human, uncomfortable clash, became something bigger than itself. A symbol. A meme. A headline. A battleground for arguments that had nothing to do with the people involved. That's the thing about public moments. They don't stay personal. They evolve, mutate, twist into whatever the world wants them to be. But the truth, the real truth, lived only in those few minutes in that studio, where words clashed, emotions cracked open, and two women tried to navigate a moment that spiraled faster than either of them intended. And the audience, they would never forget it. Even months later, fans still referenced the interview. Some called it iconic. Others called it uncomfortable. But everyone agreed, it was unforgettable. The View had seen heated debates before. It had seen political arguments, celebrity walkouts, awkward jokes, controversies big and small. But this one, this crackling, emotional exchange between Gal Gadot and Sara Haines, became something else. It became a moment embedded in pop culture. A moment people replayed. A moment people felt. A moment that reminded everyone watching that beneath the polish of television smiles, real emotions still exist. Real tension. Real conflict. Real reactions. And when those moments break through the surface, raw and unfiltered, they leave a mark. Just like this one. So now it's your turn. What do you think about what happened on that stage? Was Gal right to fire back? Did Sara push too far? Or was it all an unfortunate misunderstanding that exploded under the pressure of live television? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your perspective. And if you want more explosive, dramatic, inside the studio stories like this one, subscribe to Stage View, hit that like button, and stay tuned. More cinematic celebrity moments are coming. And trust me, you won't want to miss a single one.